When US engineers tested Africa's EV, their jaws dropped. This story isn't just about a car, it's about innovation, disbelief, and the rewriting of expectations. For years, the narrative around technology has often been that the United States, Europe, and Asia lead the world in engineering breakthroughs. Africa, in many people's minds, was not part of that picture. But what happens when a car built in Africa lands in front of American engineers and completely defies what they thought was possible? That's exactly what happened, and today we're diving deep into the moment that left engineers stunned, questioning everything they knew about electric vehicles. The stage was set when a team of US engineers was invited to review a prototype electric vehicle developed by African innovators. At first, the engineers assumed it would be another copycat EV, maybe something basic, functional, but nothing groundbreaking. Their attitude was skeptical from the start. They walked in with folded arms, raised eyebrows, and that quiet sense of superiority that comes from believing they've seen it all before. But what they encountered challenged every single one of those assumptions. The EV rolled into the testing area, sleek and minimal, with a design that looked modern but not flashy. What caught the engineers' eyes wasn't the body, it was what they were told about the car's power system. Unlike typical electric vehicles, which require external charging stations, this EV claimed to recharge itself. Yes, you heard that right. Self-charging.
Nos câbles, nos wall chargers, nos massive charging infrastructure. The idea alone sounded impossible.
One engineer whispered, "That's not how physics works." Another shook his head in disbelief, but the demonstration was about to begin. The African engineers explained that the car integrated advanced energy harvesting systems, capturing and recycling power in ways no mainstream EV had yet achieved. They kept the details limited, protecting proprietary technology, but the promise was clear. This was an EV designed not just to compete with Tesla, Rivian, or BYD, but to rewrite the rules of the EV industry itself.
And then the test drive started.
The American engineers climbed in, half amused and half curious. As the car accelerated, the first surprise was its torque. It was instant, smooth, and powerful, matching some of the best EVs on the market. But then came the jaw-dropping moment. After hours of continuous driving, the car's energy levels didn't drop the way they expected. Instead of draining like a typical EV battery, the levels stabilized, showing signs of replenishment. That's when the room went silent. Imagine engineers who live and breathe data, numbers, and equations suddenly faced with something that seemed to bend the rules. They rechecked the gauges, recalibrated the instruments, and ran diagnostics again and again. But the results were consistent. The car was generating power as it was being used. One engineer muttered, "If this is real, it changes everything." What made the jaws drop wasn't just the performance, but the implication. If an EV could truly self-charge, it meant the single biggest challenge of electric mobility, the charging infrastructure, could be eliminated. No more worrying about charging stations, long trips, or grid dependency. A self-sustaining EV could make driving cleaner, cheaper, and more accessible than ever before. For Africa, this was more than technology. It was freedom. Freedom from the limitations of expensive fuel imports, unreliable electricity grids, and dependency on foreign automakers. But the US engineers weren't just impressed, they were conflicted. On one hand, they recognized genius. On the other, they knew that such innovation would disrupt industries worth trillions of dollars. Oil companies, battery manufacturers, utility giants, all stood to lose if cars like this went mainstream. And that's where the story takes a sharp turn. Some engineers praised the achievement, calling it the most exciting EV development of the decade. Others, however, questioned the scalability, safety, and commercial viability. They wanted to see patents, test results, peer reviews. Yet deep down, many of them knew, if Africa could produce this, then the world was about to witness a shift in technological power. Word of the test quickly spread beyond the room, blogs, and whispers in tech circles began asking, could Africa really be leading the next EV revolution? For too long, African innovation had been underestimated, often overshadowed by global giants. But this car symbolized something bigger. It symbolized that innovation is not bound by geography. The engineers who left that test carried more than data. They carried a new perspective. They realized they could no longer dismiss African technology as behind or developing. Instead, they saw Africa as a source of disruption, capable of leading in industries where others thought dominance was already decided. And that, more than the car itself, was the reason their jaws truly dropped. Of course, challenges remain. Scaling production, protecting intellectual property, navigating global politics, all of these hurdles still lie ahead. But in that moment, when US engineers sat inside an African-built EV and watched the battery refuse to die, the future became clearer. Innovation belongs to everyone, and the world better start paying attention. So the next time you hear someone underestimate African technology, remember this story. Remember the engineers who doubted, then witnessed something they couldn't explain. Remember that progress often comes from unexpected places. And most importantly, remember that when US engineers tested Africa's EV, their jaws didn't just drop because of a car, they dropped because of a new future unfolding right before their eyes.